about, and I regret the title already. Really I want to talk about Buddhism and moral and ethic teaching, and Won Buddhism, moral and ethic teaching, because frankly I have always had problems with that aspect of Buddhist practice, especially in terms of what our friends from Bryn Mawr are interested in, is mindfulness and social justice. When you think of a Buddhist, think of a Buddhist. If you're like me, you think of a guy with a shaved head, robes, sitting off in some forest or in the mountains or somewhere isolated, just staring at his own belly button. So how do you get from that to social justice? The founding master, Sotasan, dealt with that issue when he began teaching what became Won Buddhism. He recognized its perception in the world. Buddhism was not popular at that time. It was considered elitist and isolationist and had no relevance in the real world. He wanted to build a Buddhism that was relevant in daily life and relevant in the real world. That was the founding motivation of his teachings. That's what attracts me to Won Buddhism. It kind of bridges that gap between inward looking and outward activity. So, charts. I'm just going to show you this one from the big book of Won Buddhism by Master Chwasan. There's this chart that we have on the practice. We call it the turtle chart because it's got the 4 little legs in the head. There are 2 pathways to practice in Won Buddhism. One is through practice itself, which is what we do. That's the traditional Buddhist practice. There's also the pathway that starts with awakening of grace and requital of grace and ends with selfless service to the public. That is his pathway in practice. We practice both of these at the same time. They're interconnected, they inform each other. But the social justice aspect of Won Buddhism is tied up in awareness of grace and requital of grace, leading in maturity to selfless service to the public. So at the beginning of the service, we bow to the Dharmakaya Buddha fourfold grace. The grace of heaven, the grace of parents, the grace of fellow beings, and the grace of laws. So I want to ask you to let those words go. In our everyday lives, especially here in America, in modern day America, we get hung up on those words, heaven and earth. That's the universe. Grace of parents. Not everyone has a great relationship with their parents. Grace may not be the first word that comes to our mind. The grace of fellow beings, Lord knows, fellow beings are a pain. It's not easy. Fellow beings are very difficult. So where's the grace in that? And then finally, grace in laws. And if you're like me, growing up in the 60s and 70s, very uncomfortable relationship with law and authority and that whole thing. So there's a little difficulty for me to buy into the grace of laws. So the founding master helps us get past that. These things are literal and figurative. Everything is literal and figurative. The underlying truth of the grace of heaven and earth is great charity. The blessings of heaven and earth, sunlight, oxygen, everything that goes out in space. Everyone has full access to that. Is an absolutely impartial charity to us. You don't have to earn the sunshine. It comes. It comes to everyone in equal measure. Impartial. So the grace of great charity is how I think of the grace of heaven and earth. The grace of parents. Parents take care of babies. Babies are not pleasant things. Sometimes they're great. Sometimes they're maddening. But parents, for some weird reason, take care of those babies until they can take care of themselves with great compassion. The grace of fellow beings. when we are frustrated with other people is because we forget our interconnectedness. We create this me and them situation, and it always causes conflict. The grace of fellow beings is that we can't live without each other. If everybody disappeared, I could not feed myself. My electricity would turn off. I would perish without everyone else. So the meaning of the grace of fellow beings is great cooperation, great interconnectedness. And then the grace of laws. In the best of all worlds, laws are there to protect us and to create equality among us. I'll get back to that. So, we have the grace of charity, the grace of compassion, the grace of cooperation, and the grace of protection and equality. We receive it every day from the world. The first step to leading a good life and to create justice in the world is to recognize that in every moment and to be grateful for that in every moment. It's so easy for me to take that for granted. I've taken grace for granted all my life. I get what I get because I get it. I deserve it. Many people in America think they get what they get because they earn it. And if you didn't get it, it's because you didn't earn it. A lot of the greed and oppression comes from this loss of thankfulness for grace. The beautiful thing about these graces is it portrays a world of abundance. All these things come to us in abundance. And to be grateful and to be thankful for the graces is to recognize the abundance around me in every moment. If you think about the ills of the world, and Lord knows we have a lot of ills right now, perhaps the core source of those ills are the invasive sense of poverty that we have, of scarcity. So much of our society now is based on an assumption of there's not enough for everybody. You've got to get what's yours. You don't have this, you need that. A sense of lacking. So the first step in leading a good life from the founding master's point of view is to recognize the grace. Remove that sense of poverty. When you remove poverty, you remove greed, you remove grasping. You can set back. You can take what you get and be grateful for it. Even if it's not what you expect, even if it's not what you want, it's still a grace. It's a privilege to be alive, to be able to take this in. The next step is to repay that grace. Requital of grace. How do you repay the grace of heaven and earth? How do you replace great charity? The founding master teaches you give to the world impartially with no notion of giving. To requite the grace of parents is to nurture self-power in those in need, with no notion of strength or weakness. To requite the grace of fellow beings is to support each other with no notion of self or other. And to requite the grace of laws is to create a world free from exploitation and oppression with no notion of retribution or revenge. So there you have it. That's how you live a good life. How do you do that? That's like sitting down to Thanksgiving and trying to eat that turkey in one bite. I can't get my mind wrapped around. How do I actually do that? The founding master gives us a little hint when he talks about the agenda for requiting the grace of heaven and earth. If you're following along in the scripture book, it's page 10. I'm just going to kind of scan through it. 1, model yourself after the exceedingly radiant way of heaven and earth. Inquire into the myriad human affairs and universal principles and know them thoroughly. Apply yourself consistently. Avoid becoming enticed by remoteness or closeness, intimacy or distance, joy or anger, sorrow or happiness. Keep to the middle way. Choose the reasonable and abandon the unreasonable. Avoid becoming enticed by good or ill fortune. Be free from thought, inaction, or rest, and harbor no concepts or signs. He's telling us that we have to practice and become Buddhas. There's this sense that in order to do good, you have to have the right mind. If you have attachments to ideas, if you have any greed or disturbances in your mind, you don't know if you're doing the right thing or not. So to make the world a better place, you need to first work on yourself. Gandhi said, you must be the change you want to see in the world. Tolstoy said, to change the world, you must change yourself. And Norman Vincent Peale said, change your thoughts and you change the world. It's a common idea that the source of change is a change in our minds. And that's the Buddhist approach to making a better world, is make your own mind better. That's what was meant in the quote that we had this morning regarding the principles of timeless end. What is the relationship between one mind and what is right, and between distraction and what is wrong? Founding Master replied, what is right comes from one mind in action. What is wrong comes from distracted thoughts in action. That's what the threefold practice is. We meditate to calm our mind so we see clearly and our inner wisdom arises. We study ourselves, we study the world, so we have wisdom. And then we take that equanimity, we take that wisdom, and we do what we think best in the moment. That's where I come to that point of dissatisfaction. It seems like such a long play. How many years have I been practicing? Am I ready to do good in the world? I don't feel like I'm doing anything. There are things going on out there. There are people that need to be fed. There are houses, forests burning down. There's opposition everywhere. I feel helpless. I feel small. I'm just sitting here practicing, and what good am I doing? That's an uncomfortable feeling. And I'm not sure I'm over that yet. I fight with that all the time. I feel like there's more I could be doing, but I don't know how. In fact, feeling that way kind of paralyzes me in a sense, and I end up doing nothing. So I try to concentrate on what I can control and focus on the sphere of influence I do have. And of course that begins in my own mind. I've spent a lot of time over the past few years looking hard at what I do. I talked last week about, Reverend Kim had a Dharma talk that was wonderful. Spend time thinking about, looking at what you do, because what you do is who you are. What you do is a reflection of your mind. I spent, update from last week, I have now spent 140 hours playing Civic 7, Civilization 7, since the beginning of the year. So you know what's important to me? Playing pretend world games. I may think I'd like to feed the hungry, but you know, I kind of like this video game. Our actions are our only possessions. I can't lie. My actions are my only possessions. What I do is what I am. So I look at myself closely and I say, what harm am I causing right now? What habits do I have in my behavior and in my thoughts that create harm? How do I harm the world? By my little habits of, oh, I'm going to take these plastic bags and do this when I have glass that I could use. Little things. I can control those things that have an effect on the world. I can control that. When I'm troubled by something and I tend to turn inward and I ignore my wife, or I'm dismissive of friends because I have this concern, that's harm. Think about how you feel when you are not being dealt with fully by those you love and those you associate with. That causes harm. So when I do that to others, I'm creating harm. If I can recognize that in the moment and not do that, I am turning harm into grace. And there are a million things that I'm not even aware of yet that I do without thinking. So the first thing I do is try to reduce the harm I cause, because social justice begins with stopping the harm that you cause. That's not nothing. That's hard for me to remember. Not causing harm is a net gain. That's a big win. After I take care of that, then I can go out and try to do positive things. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take care of the low-hanging fruit first. That makes me feel a little better if I've recognized that I had done something that I normally do, and that the world is a better place for that. It's a great place to start. The other thing that I forget in this whole process is that, as it says in the Grace of Fellow Beings, interconnectedness is a reality. What we do moment to moment affects not only ourselves, but those near us, and in fact, it affects the whole world. Sure, what I do right now is not affecting what's going on in China very much, but it does have an effect. Interconnectedness is very real, it's universal, you can't stop it. Everything you do in every moment affects the entire world. I am here sitting here right now at this moment with you because of everything that has happened from the Big Bang until this moment. Cause and effect is all-powerful and all-pervasive. So, if a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon, and now I'm sitting here, what I'm doing right now may affect something tremendous in 2 years, 5 years, 50 years, 100 years. Who knows, if someone in this room listening to something I say, it's touched by something in some way, and in 40 years do something that was in part affected by what we did here together. The potential for huge changes. So, I concentrate on myself. I try to be a better brother. Then I concentrate on my family. I try to be better in my family, and as a family, we try to be better. If that works out, I work with my friends and coworkers. I try to be a better friend and a better coworker. And my friends and coworkers may become better for that. The people they touch may become better for that, and on and on and on it goes. So I try to remember that chain of events, both to keep myself in line and to give me hope that I mean something and I matter. Because I realize that I don't mean anything and I don't matter in myself. Only through my connections to others do I have meaning And do I make a difference? And the last thing I'd like to say, I want to quote something from the Diamond Sutra, which is a really, really famous teaching from the Buddha. And it talks about a lot of things, but it comes back to the idea of charity. What is charity? What is the mind of charity? And I always find this passage extremely helpful. It is from section 24, the merits of transmitting the sutra, for those of you who are following along. And it says, the Buddha said, Subhuti, if a person collected treasures as high as 3,000 of the highest mountains and gave them all to others, this merit would be less than that which would be accrued to another person who simply observed and studied these teachings and out of kindness explained them to others. The latter person would accumulate hundreds of times the merit, hundreds of thousands of millions of times the merit. There is no conceivable comparison. So, when I think of social justice and charity, I tend to think of money and doing things and grand gestures. The Buddha reminds us that to work at being the best person you can be, to cleanse yourself of your own injuries and your own injustices and your own anger and greed, and then help others to do the same, is the greatest good that you can do. And you don't have to go out there and harangue people. You need to be like this, and everything will be fine. But the Buddha's time, when he's saying teaching, he's not saying what I'm doing is useless. He's saying, get out in the world, be it. Be the change you want in the world. The merit of going into the world with your practice every day, every moment, is incalculable. So, whenever you're feeling like, I don't do enough, I wish there was something I can do, go out in the world, share your faith, share your practice, and trust the practice. Thank you. In deference to our friends from Bryn Mawr, I'd like to first ask if any of you have anything you would like to say or any questions you might have. All right, Kevin, did you have something you wanted to say?
Brian, that was very, very two statements and then a question for you. One, when you mentioned about moments you ignore your wife, I wanted to say, she's sitting right over there.
I'm glad I didn't say that other thing.
But it makes me think of this quick story of a child, possibly I heard it. A child's walking on the beach and sees thousands of starfish and starts throwing them in the ocean. And another man walks by and says, no, you're not going to make a difference. There's so many. He said, I made a difference in that one starfish. So that kind of makes. Now my question to you. Again, excellent talk. I find it easier to feel compassion towards others than yourself. And I kind of battle with that because, you have things where, I'm having a bad day, there's people getting their houses bombed right now. So then I'm like, all right, well then I can't feel guilty or I can't feel bad. And I have to accept that I feel bad. It's this big cycle, So it's kind of, so with your insights, would you have any advice in terms of finding that balance to where, my problems are minuscule compared to most people in this world. How do I balance that? Well, it's okay to have a bad day and not feel guilty because how dare I feel bad for my life when I had such a good life. Yeah, I don't know if you get what I'm saying. Like, yeah,
I think so. So, first of all, I need to do a disclaimer. I'm not a good authority on how to be good to yourself, because I've never had a problem with that. I love me some me. I've got the opposite problem. I kind of got to pull back a little bit. And but I understand completely what you're saying. I have used that on myself all the time, and it absolutely does not work for me. Oh, I've got this problem because, I'm seeing this little gap in the floor there, and does that mean my house is falling down? And I obsess on that. And meanwhile, there are people whose houses are burned flat all across South Carolina and in Southern California. I realized that playing that mathematics game, that comparison game, that's the ego mind trying to compare and analyze and better, worse, and I can get lost forever in that cycle. I try to go back to the fourfold graces. Remember, not everything comes from heaven and earth is nice. The fires, the earthquakes, the diseases. The founding master teaches we have to be grateful for the opportunity to practice, which means when adversity comes, when things come that we hate, that are painful, we welcome them because it's an opportunity to test our practice and to strengthen our practice and to get closer to that awakening that we're hoping for. So I try to practice what I call unconditional gratitude, and it's tough. I'm just beginning to see little glimmers. I have to be grateful for everything that comes. Yes, I don't want all of it. I don't want most of it. I just want my video game. But I have to be grateful for it all because it is coming whether I like it or not. Disliking it's not going to do a bit of good. And if I avoid it, I'm not exercising my practice. I'm not giving myself the opportunity to grow and show others what to do in the middle of adversity. That's part of the teaching. When I get hit and people see me get hit, how I react is very informative.
Thank you for your talk and also for that answer. I love the idea of meditation, but I've sometimes the clearing the thoughts feels like so insurmountable. Like they're just so active and it's like I can't even get to there yet. Mm-hmm. And if I struggle to get there, like what's the point? Like I'm wondering if you have advice, insights, your own experience clearing your mind and being mindful of what's going on in your brain.
Thank you. So in the Four Graces, remember when I talked about the requital? There was with no notion of. That's a huge part of the practice. It's eliminating our preconceptions and our ideas about what things should be, or what they are, or what they aren't. Meditation is really difficult in that way. We all have an idea about what is meditation. This is meditation, but that's not. What is it for? Well, it's supposed to be for this, it's not for that. First step to meditate is to try to sweep all that away. I can't describe it because it just gives you new ideas. So this is what I will say. It's okay to start off with, let's just see what it's like to be me right now. Without judgment, without grabbing, without rejecting. Just, if I can sit here for 3 minutes and just see what it's like to be me right now, meaning whatever comes up. That's what meditation is. If you start there, you will find your meditation eventually. Because in just doing that, you will learn something about yourself. And in that learning, you will develop a different meditation. Every session is different. do it. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what your reaction is. All that matters is that you show up for 3 minutes a day at whatever time of day you choose to do it. If you can do that for 5 days in a row, boom, you're on your way. That's really all that matters.
Can I add something? I was listening to, so I have not been meditating for a very, very long time, but I'm at a point where I'm comfortable with it, and it is a habit. But in the beginning, I was listening to an interview. In this case, both the interviewer and the interviewee were seasoned meditators. The person being interviewed does 2 hours a day for he's been meditating for like 20 years. And they agreed that it is still a practice after so many hours. Like you still have those days where you're like, oh my gosh, mine's wandering, and that, like that whole saying goes, that's why they call it up practice, because you're just constantly, growing in that area. And so that was really helpful for me, that if someone who's been doing this for 20 years and is now up to 2 hours a day, still has days where their mind is all over the place, then what I'm experiencing is completely normal. And that helped me to continue rather than hang up my hat.
Yeah, it's just, don't say I have to do it this long or it's not valid. Don't say this has to happen or it's not valid. Don't say I have to do it this way or it's not valid. I didn't meditate sitting for a long, long time because the only way I could do what I thought was meditation was walking meditation. All I did was walk for years. Eventually, I got to the point where I could sit. And fun fact, I hated chanting when I got started here. I hated it.
Hated what?
Chanting. This is uncomfortable. I hate this. Now it's the most effective practice I have. I chant every night for half an hour, and it taught me how to sit, because things happened to me when I was chanting that had never happened to me when I was sitting. I went, oh, if I sit, and then, when I sat, and no fences, nothing, just do something, and something will happen. How's that? Here's my advice to you: do something, and something will happen. I think we can all take that with us. Thank you.
Brian, can I add one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
If your intention of meditating and building your practice is to become more mindful, it's actually in the act of your mind wandering and then bringing your mind back that builds your mindfulness. And those changes I was able to experience rather quickly in my practice.
And that was my first realization of be grateful for the opportunity to practice. The mind wandering, that's not a mistake, that's not a fault, that's an opportunity, because it gives you the chance to do what you were sitting there to do in the first place. That's like saying, I'm going to buy some puppies and then being mad that there are puppies everywhere. You two fight it out. Roll.
So I'm Rowan. Thank you for hosting the Bryn Mawr group. I'm with Interfaith Philadelphia, so I've been kind of putting different faith organizations with these students for the week. So thanks again for having us as well. Just wondering if we might want to reconvene so that the Bryn Mawr students can maybe sit in a circle and all be together, and then kind of have a period in which folks might be able to ask questions more directly with some of the key members of the faith community. Would that sound okay?
That is a goal for after the service.
Okay, after the service, so we're still in the service.
Yes,
Just
we're still
making sure
in.
that
Yep.
that didn't get missed in the communication chain. Thank you.
Probably should wrap it up with one more.
Why, as much as I like it to be one more, let's go with our friend in the back. I know someone else had their hand up.
There's a
I
passion.
did. I did.
There's a passion.
Okay, but only if there's time. Only
No,
if there's time.
please, go ahead.
Me?
Yes,
There's someone in
please.
the back. Okay, I just had something in response. I'm so sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Me?
Yeah,
Kevin.
Kevin? Okay, nice to meet you. I've kind of also been thinking about this and about this thing of like, is it okay to feel strife and hardness and hurt for something that's happening in my life when it's not to the same capacity as something that's happening in another person's life? And I've been thinking about how there's no tragedy of the commons when it comes to suffering. There's not one big pot of suffering that if you take too much out of, someone else is not able to feel their suffering. So I think remembering that just because you are feeling something to the capacity that you're feeling it does not mean that someone else can't also have that same capacity in their different situation. You're not taking away from their ability to feel that through your own emotions.
Thank you for your kind attention. I appreciate you listening to my rant.